If your first home was unstable, you didn't learn life first. You learned how to survive. You learned how to read the room, brace for impact, keep the peace, and stay small enough to not get crushed. And if nobody ever helps you revisit the first home, you can spend your whole adult life surviving while calling it living. Today, we're going to the root, the first home. When I say the first home, I'm not just talking about a building. I'm talking about your first environment of love, truth, safety, attachment, chaos, silence, conflict, and meaning. Your first home teaches you what love feels like, what conflict means, whether truth is safe, whether your needs matter, whether people stay, whether peace is possible. That's why this matters so much. Because a child doesn't interpret home with adult logic. A child interprets home with their nervous system. And the nervous system asks one main question: am I safe here? Hey guys, my name is Thomas Emmanuel Orms O'Brien. I'm the president and co-founder of Building a Home Inc. And we introduce ourselves at the beginning of every video every week because we understand that our verbiage is very unique to us. And we want you to understand, and we want you to know where we're coming from as we approach all these topics, so you have a better understanding of why we explain the things that we do. First and foremost, I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. I'm a rehabilitated habitual liar. In 2022, I made a suicide attempt and survived. For the last 10 years, I've been working in the financial services industry. And for the last 20 years, I've been studying world religions with a focus on Near Eastern and Western theology centered around the Bible. And I was being groomed to become a messianic rabbi until I left it all behind. Now, I'm currently in the pursuit of a degree of psychology in the form right now of being an autodidact, soon to be formally enrolled in a university. And the reason why I bring all of that together is because we have what's known as the Building a Home framework. When I survived my suicide attempt 3 years ago, I started to deeply think about the most important questions in life. Number one, who am I? Number two, why am I here? Because up until 27 years old, I hadn't experienced much living. Most of my life has been based off of survival. And that's for a myriad of different reasons, partially because I come from a traumatic childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 8, and unfortunately, that divorce revealed the brokenness of my biological father. He went from a loving and caring dad to a sociopathic, narcissistic addict who had displayed very little regard for my well-being. Now, it could be argued that he was always this person, and the divorce was just the catalyst of him revealing his true character. But I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that he was 100% evil. Unfortunately, though, he was neither the dad I needed nor wanted. And due to his behavior, it caused extreme chaos for my mother and I. For many years of my life, he was absent, but when he was around, things were very, very difficult. He was a master manipulator, and He knew exactly what he needed to do and say to get me to fearfully live as his little soldier, not his son. And I won't go into the details on that because he is since passed, and I try not to speak ill of the dead, but at the same time, I must speak the truth. And so, in that upbringing, obviously, I didn't have a lot of options, and my view that was shaped of the world wasn't that great. At the same time, both of my parents were religious, and so I tried to reconcile the suffering of my own life with the existence of God, which made it very hard to do. So I would say for many years of my life, despite this very tiny internal feeling that he does exist, I displayed many atheistic tendencies. I didn't want to believe that a good, loving God could possibly exist with the amount of suffering that I experienced in my life. I no longer believe that now because Building a Home Inc. is a theistic company that does believe in the God of the Bible expressed as the universal force of love perfectly through the person of Jesus. And we don't say that to be religious. In fact, we abhor religion. What's most effective, I think, for the highest form of human living would be a relationship with God. And religion defined for us is this: men or women defining God to you, as opposed to a relationship is God defining himself for you. And so this is a big distinction, and I would encourage you to explore path of relational connection with God. And if you're a person with atheistic tendencies, obviously that explanation is suboptimal for you, I understand. But I think you will resonate with our framework because it does literally find a place, I think, for everyone. As I contemplated the collapse of my life, and I started to expand my mind and read and watch new things from new people, things that I hadn't considered reading or watching before, I understood that life was not as black and white as I had thought. And I needed to pursue truth to the utmost. And I realized, though, that there were several things in my life that had led me to suicide. And one of the mentors that I ended up adopting later on explained that most times it is the effective measure to reverse engineer success. And so as I was analyzing my own suicidal ideation, I came to the conclusion that it can be stopped. All suicidal ideation in the world can be stopped. Because if that is a point of destination, then there must also be, through inference, a reversal of that destination and a journey in the opposite direction of suicide. And so, as I continued to do my own analysis and research, I understood that I would have to now construct the life that takes me in the opposite direction of suicidal ideation. And it would need to be done with very specific things. And so I came up with the Building a Home framework. It is that life is like a house, and it must be built with intention. You cannot live passively. It must be engaged with intention. And so there are 7 areas that I realized if I had had all of those things, my life would be whole. Now, that's not to say it is a life without pain and suffering, because that is the universal experience of every single human being on the planet. but it would be whole. And what is wholeness? Well, nothing missing and nothing broken, which in certain Near Eastern and Semitic explanations of the word, that is perfect. And if you were to be a Bible believing individual that views Jesus as a paradigmatic axiom of the model citizen that any one human being could be, that the highest form of living would be to be conformed into the image of Jesus, in that you were a servant leader that healed people and impacted humanity forever. Now, there is archaeological and anthropological evidence that a man named Jesus was alive, and so his existence is not up for debate. The debate must be whether or not the claims of the Bible in his supernatural status as God coming to earth as a human being have validity or not. And my viewpoint is that there is no empirical data that can, through science, lead someone to God. I think that people have pursued science looking for truth, and the conclusion that they reach is that God must exist. But in terms of data itself, right, if you were to make the attempt through the scientific method of measuring the energy of a photon, the numerical value given back to you wouldn't write down on paper God exists. But you could infer that if there is a energy output that is given into the universe, that is given through a specific system, that system with an engineer's mind would have to be designed. And if that system were to have a design, what type of mind could possibly design the systems within the universe? Or, as some atheistic individuals believe, that it is a myriad of random processes that have gone through complex change in an evolutionary universe. Which I believe in some aspects of evolution, but I find it very hard to believe that order can come out of chaos. And despite not reconciling all of the scientific implications on the Bible being 100% accurate and that it's literal, I do believe that we have very good explanations as to what the Bible says, what it means. And I think the only difference between a theist and an atheist is an experience with God. Because a theist and an atheist look at the same set of scientific evidence in the universe. It's the same data. And the theist says, oh my gosh, I see God everywhere. And the atheist says, I see God nowhere. But it's the same exact data. And so what that means, it's not an intelligence or an understanding or an IQ problem. I believe is an experiential problem, that one person has had an experience with God, the other person hasn't. And so, because science is a means to an end, science is a form of pursuit of the truth. It is not the truth in and of itself. Now, does that mean that doesn't mean that the things we discover in science aren't true? But science is a methodology for the discovery of the truth. And a lot of the forefathers of science were theistic individuals. They were creationist in that they believed if they were to pursue the truth in the way of science, i.e., discovering the nature of the universe and everything that it entails, through a myriad of different scientific practices, which, science, the field of sciences are massive, and the list is very long. But they already performed science with the idea that they would discover law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver. Pretty simple position one may have. And so, regardless, though, I realize that there are areas in not only my life, but I believe that are intricately woven into the psyche of every single human being that, if lacking, would lead to some form of despair. And that despair would then have to be remedied because your brain's primary function is to assist you in survival. And it does that in a lot of different ways. But one of the things that it does is called um, coping mechanisms. Now, some are adaptive and some are maladaptive, meaning some assist you in survival in a positive context, and some assist you in survival in a negative context. And when a human being develops a maladaptive copingism due to despair, the overarching result that is obtained from that in one's life, I think, leads to death. And I believe that if one is to truly live, we must go beyond the evolutionary biological requirements of survival. And I think that is what separates the human being from every other mammal on the planet, is we have the capacity to do more than just survive. And we can do that through a connection to the divine, and we can do that by positively impacting the lives of those that are around us. And I think if you were to pursue the two most important questions, who am I, why am I here, the BHI framework would give structure in how to pursue those questions. And so, because life is like a house, we believe these 7 concepts to be absolutely true. A human being must have a solid foundation, and that foundation must be love and truth. Why are those synonymous? Because love without truth is tolerance, and truth without love is brutality. And if we're looking at the highest form of living, optimization of the human life, the primary propulsion system, which would lead to the most impactful and powerful human being, would be a person who comes to life through secure attachment. If you're familiar with psychology, you understand of what is known as attachment theory. I won't go into all of it right now, but long story short, when a human being in their childhood, basically in utero till 12 years old, the most important years, 13 and beyond are just as important, but for different reasons. But from in utero to 12 years old, for a child to form what is known as secure attachment, they must experience love, safety, and predictability. And when those things are missing, you develop one of the other 4 attachment styles, which are maladaptive coping mechanisms that do not aid you in becoming the highest form of which you could be, the quote-unquote best version of yourself. And so, as an adult, if you were missing that as a child, you must reclaim love and truth as your propulsion system. And as a theistic individual, I think the way you do that is knowing that God loves you unconditionally. As the Bible says, you have been beautifully and wonderfully made. You are valuable. You have inherent value because you have the capacity to become a co-creator with God in this universe. And love in action, as most appropriately love should be used as a verb, um, don't necessarily think it can be described as a feeling. I think there are feelings as a byproduct of understanding, knowing, and receiving love, as well as giving it. But I don't think it is a feeling within itself. And pair that with truth. So, truth would be what is measurable and observable in the known universe, and my truth, but not my opinion, like many of my generation say, but what is actually true about you. Your deepest fears, your greatest dreams, the worst things that have ever happened to you, your greatest moments of success in life, your favorite food, your favorite color, your favorite people, your favorite hobbies. What's true about you? Because if you understand that you're loved, you will have the capacity to relentlessly pursue truth for the remainder of your days. And that truth, which, if there is the ultimate truth in the universe, it would be what is true about God, ourselves, our environment, and others. If you were to find out what's true about all three of those things, then you might be able to say your intellectual capacity for understanding would be perfect. And so, without love and truth as your foundation, the very thing that you're building your life on, you will collapse. Because fear and lies cannot sustain human living. They can help you survive for a while, but to thrive and actually live a life worth living, your foundational principles must be love and truth. After that is the basement, which is identity and integrity. Why? Identity is who you are actually. And if you believe to be if you're a theistic individual that believes that God created, then you also inherently believe then you were created and you have an identity directly from the creator of the universe. This is synonymous with all Abrahamic texts, Semitic and Near Eastern manuscripts, including the Bible, that God has an identity specifically for you. And if you were to know that, you would be able to be secure. It would be something that is irremovable from you, and no one could possibly rob you of it. And so I believe it is something that is received. It is something that can be discovered on a journey of self-reflection, introspection, and relationship with God. Pair that with integrity. Once you're on the journey to discovery of who you are, or you happen to know who you are already, which is an advantage, of course, then you would be yourself every single day to the utmost of your capacity until you died. That would make you integral, a man or a woman with integrity. You are you, with zero deviation whatsoever. And then that would bring us to our first floor, which is stewardship, physical health, and financial health. Because if love and truth is your foundation, you are who you are and you are being who you are every single day. You would love yourself enough to want to be physically healthy and financially healthy. Obviously, physical health, there's a whole myriad of science behind it, but long story short, resistance training, which builds muscle. Muscle is the greatest indicator outside of certain principles in the human body that indicate longevity, right? The more muscle you have equals the longer you live, period, end of story. We could cite 1,000 sources and we could talk about it for the next 10 years and not have spoken about it enough. And then, of course, what you eat, right? Your food, especially when you focus on gut health, there is something called the gut-brain axis. Over 70% of the serotonin in our bodies is produced in the gut. That's one of the happy chemicals that is produced and dispersed by your brain into your bloodstream. Very, very important to understand those two factors. And so, even though I'm not where I need to be yet, I focus on eating foods that heal my gut, my microbiome, and I train 4 days of the week at the gym doing resistance training. And financial health, if you were to come from a place of love in pursuit of truth, being who you are, you would also, by a natural byproduct, want to be financially successful, right? Because one of the main reasons people go into suicidal ideation is that they lack in financial health. And we define that in 3 different things. Number 1, get on a budget. Why? Because if you're not leading your money is not leading you. And I'm not talking about a budget to restrict. I'm talking about understanding your finances so that you can command them. Build a command center, right? And then, obviously, at a certain point, you would no longer need to budget because you are living in such abundance that you wouldn't have to restrict to succeed. You would expand to succeed. That's something else for later on. But number 2, get out of debt. Why? Because if someone else has the capacity to tell you what to do with your money, you are not free. You're a slave. We're talking about consumer debt specifically here, right? Later on, once you understand those principles and you have a foundation of discipline and success, you can leverage debt to get cash flow or income producing assets, right? That would be either, through a business or through a business, right? The greatest way to be financially successful is through business, period, end of story, right? Thirdly, it would be invest for the future. And you do that first by investing in yourself. Why? Because you are your greatest asset. You bring you to the table every single time. The more you know, the more skills you have, the more wisdom you have, which is the capacity to utilize skills, right, in the most maximal way. And the more knowledge you have that is specifically tailored for you, that investment will never lose value. Now, obviously, you can get into, investing again into cash flow producing assets, right? But your primary investment should be you. If you're married, you and your spouse. Because when you do it right, the two of you, when you increase the value you can bring, the market will respond and give you more for the more that you bring. That is the abundance mindset, the servant leader. You are here to provide value and solve problems. When you can do those 2 things, the market will respond to you. And so you want to be physically healthy and financially healthy. That's stewardship. Bringing us to the second floor, which is vocations. That is from the Latin root word vocare, meaning to call. What is your specific purpose? And we believe that the discovery of purpose can be found in 4 or 5 specific things. Number 1, what are the worst things that have ever happened to you? Because the only redemption for pain and suffering is when it is utilized as a tool to assist other human beings. Otherwise, it is a cycle of endless, perpetual, meaningless suffering on earth. And if that's the case, we should all pull the plug tomorrow. Unless pain and suffering can be redeemed, life is not worth living. Why? Because pain and suffering is the universal experience for every single human being on the planet. Now, it varies in size, scope, and severity for each and every single one of us, but regardless, pain. And that pain cannot define you. It must be used by you to bring healing into the world. And so that's the first way you discover purpose. The second way you discover purpose is your childhood dreams. What you wanted to do or be before you experienced pain. Now, if you experience pain at a very young age, that is a very hard question to answer, like myself. I didn't have much time to dream and imagine before my parents divorced at 8. And if you understand the science, that critical time period is perhaps the worst age in which it can happen to a child. Because I was cognizant enough to understand what was happening, but not enough to understand why it was happening. Which is basically you're falling. The best way to describe it is, and there is no floor. It's just endless falling and blackness and death. Because your brain and your mind do not have the capacity to positively resolve the answers, the questions to the answers to those questions. Regardless, though, your childhood dreams. Then, of course, it is you bring who you are into what you do. Being informs doing. That's why identity is second step to a whole life. Because too many people get their identity from the work they do, as opposed to bringing who they are into what you do. The reason why it is a problem if you get your identity from your work is because when the work is no longer possible to continue doing, you die along with it. So after vocation, you have the attic, which is joy. And joy, simply defined in our view, is your hobbies, the things you love doing with the people you love doing them with. Why is this so paramount? Because one of the most brilliant psychologists ever, his name is Dr. Stuart Brown, he wrote a book called Play. In it, he says, the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. There is a neurological requirement for joy in every human being. Now, what does that mean? It must be scheduled intentionally. Joy doesn't run your life. We're not hedonistic in that we just live on every whim and desire. That is not the most optimal, highest form of living. That's suboptimal. The highest form of living comes when a person is intensely focused and ruthlessly zealous on their purpose. They work very, very hard to accomplish it, and then intentionally schedule joy. And so it must be it must be in your life, period, end of story. It's not something you can save for later. It's not an extra. Joy is a neurological requirement. The happiness study done by Harvard University, it's ongoing, started in 1938. So from 1938 to present, that's 68, 98, 88 years of human data. And you know what the greatest takeaway from it to this day is still? Relationships. Human happiness thrives relationally. That is a connection worldview, right? So when you're connected to God, the universe, yourself, and others, that is the highest form of human living. And then after that, on the side of the house, we have the chimney, which is release. And simply defined as letting go of the people and things that keep you from your purpose. That relationship you've been holding on too long, those habits that are killing you, that bitterness, unforgiveness, resentment inside for the person or persons that have harmed you. Let it all go. If it doesn't serve your purpose, let it go. That's people and things. And lastly, we have the skylight, the top of the house, which illuminates every single room. And what is that? That is wisdom. Because knowledge is great, but wisdom is greatest. Why? Because wisdom is proper application of knowledge, AE skills. When you are skillful, when you are wise, you properly apply your knowledge. For example, many people know to classify a tomato as a fruit. Why? Because it's a seed-bearing plant. But you do not put a tomato in a fruit salad. So it's proper application of knowledge. And I would say if you have all of those things, love and truth, identity and integrity, physical and financial health, joy, release, and wisdom, that would be perfection. There would be nothing missing and nothing broken. And this type of life is possible for every single human being. It's just a matter of getting there. All right, guys. How early divorce teaches survival, the topic of today's video. If divorce or separation happened early, especially before 12 years old, it doesn't change family structure. It changes what the child expects from life. Right? And correction, it doesn't just change family structure. It changes what the child expects from life. Here's what often gets learned. Love can break. Stability can disappear. Conflict means danger. Adults are unpredictable. My feelings are inconvenient. I need to adapt fast. So children of divorce often become incredible survivors. And it's not just divorce, it's anyone who came from a traumatic childhood. All of these symptoms are the same. Divorce is just the highest avatar for us because that's what happened in my life. Now, I also experienced trauma, including the divorce, right? But children of divorce often become incredible survivors. They get good at reading tone, reading tension, anticipating collapse, becoming what is needed, and hiding what is costly. And the tragedy is this: those skills work in chaos. It's actually an intelligent response. Your brain makes you great at those things to survive your environment. But the problem is they sabotage intimacy, peace, identity, and purpose later on in adult life. And I certainly understand that very well. I haven't started living even until I was 27 years old. From 8 to 27, lost. Completely lost. And so, let me put this in plain psychological language. Hypervigilance. Definition of a word today. Hypervigilance is when your system is always scanning for danger. Not because you're dramatic, because instability trained you to expect surprise pain. When your environment was chaos growing up, death could happen at any moment. Right? That is the nervous system's understanding of the environment, because pain equals death. For a prolonged pain equals death, and so your brain wants to mitigate pain. Unfortunately, when you develop maladaptive coping mechanisms, that pain extends for decades in your life until the root cause is addressed. Trauma is symptomatic, but unless you address the root, you can't be healed. But the good news is, when you properly define trauma, it's hopeful. Because trauma properly defined is not the event in itself that happened, it's the internal wound that you sustained as a result. And so the nature of a wound is that it can be healed. And so what happens is that you read people too much. You overanalyze tone. You feel tension before anyone says anything. And you can't relax even when things are calm. People pleasing. People pleasing is not kindness. It's often a safety strategy. I know this one oh so well. Because what happens is you say, if I keep everyone else okay, maybe I'll be okay. The next is collapse expectancy. This is when your system assumes good things never last. The other shoe's about to drop. It's not happening fast enough. This person or this thing is too good to be true. And so, even when life is stable, part of you is bracing. I still experience that to this day. My life is so good. So good. But I find myself waiting for disaster still. Now, this feeling isn't as strong as it was in the previous years of my life, but it's not gone. But thank God I'm doing better with it every single day. The more I experience good life, the less I experience that feeling. Because healing is only possible when you experience something new. When it goes as you expected, that solidifies the trauma. But when you experience something new, it's like a dermatologist scraping out a cancerous section of your skin. They have to go subdermal and scrape it out. And only then, once it's healed and properly taken care of post-surgery, can new skin start to grow. So first, that's like painful surgery has to happen. Is when you enter into a beautiful situation and that new experience starts to cut at the wound. And you start to panic because those feelings come out and you're just like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening right now? Am I falling back to old patterns? You know what? No, they're too good to be true. This is too good to be true. Let me self-sabotage it. Let me stop the surgery. Let me wake up mid-surgery and not let the cancerous skin be removed. But you still expect the fight, the betrayal, the money problem, the letdown, the abandonment. And that's not wisdom. Most of us confuse anxiety with being wise. But that's survival memory. And here's the big one: shame. Shame says something is wrong with me. Maybe the family broke because I wasn't enough. Maybe if I were easier, better, quieter, stronger, things would have stayed together. Because what happens is that a child, due to the limiting power of their psyche and neurological development at whatever age this occurs, they personalize what they cannot explain. It's the brain's only option. It's the mind's only option. They personalize what they cannot explain. And so those unspoken conclusions become adult patterns later on in life. So the adult symptoms, and stop me if you've felt these or you know exactly what I'm talking about. This is where the first home keeps echoing. Trust. You want connection, but deep down, you expect betrayal, inconsistency, or collapse. Money. Remember, because money is a tool, so money is just a mirror. What your finances look like is a mirror reflection of your internal dialogue. If you're healed, healthy, and on the way to greatness, that's exactly what your finances are going to look like. If you're broken, ashamed, and still walking in despair, that's exactly what your finances are going to look like. Okay? So the first home felt unstable. Money often feels like danger, not just math. So you avoid it, or you obsess over it, or you use it to self-soothe. Addiction, right? People ask the wrong question. They ask, why the addiction? No, you ask, what pain? Every addict only became an addict due to pain. Maladaptive coping mechanism. Next area that affects purpose. This is a big one. I'm still searching for it. I can't say that I've like put my finger on it. I think I've entered into the circle of discovery where it is, right? I'm certainly much closer to knowing what it is than before. It's not nothing now. It's more of like semi-specific generalization, but you still have to build on that. But when the childhood is spent surviving, adulthood feels aimless. Because survival trains reaction, not vocation. To know purpose, you must become a upward aiming, legacy thinking, future vision holding individual. But when you're surviving, you can't do that because survival keeps you right here. What's right in front of your face or what's behind. In survival mode, there is no positive future. There is only the death to be avoided. So it's impossible to have purpose when you live that way. The biggest one is peace. Peace can feel suspicious. Calm can feel fake. Experienced that today. I had a moment at the office where it was like everything was so peaceful and I was like, man, what am I doing? I'm missing something. And stability can feel boring or dangerous. And that's why adult children of divorce often ask, why can't I just rest? Why can't I trust? Why do I keep sabotaging? Why do I feel behind? Man, I feel so behind today. I don't feel like this every day, but recording this video today, I really didn't want to. Because part of you is still living in the first home. And I recognize that. But here's the thing, you can take responsibility without shame. And I hope more than anything that's what you take away from our video today. And this matters because this is not your fault. Your past, your childhood, everything you experienced, it's not your fault. But it is now your responsibility. Because only you have the capacity to change the story. The work has to be done with your hands. Your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength must go into the pursuit of a relationship with God, yourself, and other people. No one can do it for you. People can assist. I hope that's what I'm doing. I hope I provide value that I can assist you in getting to where you need to be. I certainly am being assisted to get to where I need to be. My relationship with God, my relationship with my wife, my mentors. I have assistance. You can be assisted. But it's your responsibility now. And you are not guilty. I want to say that again. You are not guilty for what happened in your first home. But healing becomes your work when you become aware. Our quote in BHI and building a home is, clarity brings awareness, awareness brings options, options bring opportunities. Once you're aware you have a problem, you have two options: acknowledge or avoid. When you acknowledge it, you then have the opportunity to be healed. You have the opportunity to fix that problem. You have the opportunity to build for a better future. But when you avoid, you lose the opportunity to live. And that's the line between blame and responsibility, is that healing becomes your work when you become aware. Blame says, they did this, so I'm stuck. Responsibility says, they did this, this is what happened, now I rebuild. And that's the whole spirit of BHI, Building a Home Inc. Brick by brick, one day at a time, truth first, no pretending, no excuses, no shame spiral, just reality and the next step. And here's why Jesus matters here. If you want to understand why I follow Jesus, it's because Jesus does not invite you into religious performance. He invites you into truth and relationship. He moves toward what is broken. He names what is real. He does not humiliate the wounded. He tells the truth in a way that restores. So when we bring Jesus into this, we're not using him to bypass pain. Unfortunately, that's not a promise in the Bible. I wish it was. But you are using truth to finally face it. And so the lie of religion is ignore the wound, perform the script. The way of relationship is tell the truth, receive love, and rebuild the house. That's why love and truth are the foundation, because without them, you can't revisit the first home, your childhood, your pain, your suffering safely. So here's the first home rebuild, 7-day practice. For the next 7 days, I'm inviting you, I'm challenging you, but I'm inviting you, do these things. Day 1 and 2, write down one truth about your first home. Journaling changed my life. I used to judge people incorrectly that journaled. I viewed it as less than, I viewed it as weak, I viewed it as unintelligent and overly emotional. When I started to journal, because I had a perspective change, one of the mentors that spoke to me, and he said, don't ever rely on your memory. Write it down. And I don't know why, but when he said that, I just knew I was going to just start journaling for the rest of my life. Jim Rohn, that's who said it. I was watching one of his old seminars. He said, don't rely on your memory. Write it down. The reason why you write it down is so that you can revisit it later. And it doesn't just have to be about the traumas of your past. It can be about what you're feeling in the present, the plans, ideas, imaginations, iterations, and things that you're planning for the future. Because what happens is when you write it down, you take it from the ethereal in the mind and you make it a reality by putting it on parchment or paper. And there's the science of writing. When you inscribe something and you write it, it sends a signal to your brain that indicates it's something of note, that it's something of importance. And believe it or not, that actually will help with memory retention later on. The hippocampus will come online and say, yup, that's something that we want to put into the archives and keep around. And so just write one truth about your home, and here's some examples. If this was the truth, there was no peace. That was mine. I learned to hide. And I'm giving you all the things that are true about me so that if it resonates with you, you have to understand that you're not alone, because isolation is so very dangerous. But I learned to hide. I felt responsible. I stopped trusting adults. I felt alone. And your first, when you write that, it's going to be hard because it's going to elicit an emotional response, and just let it go through you. Don't resist. Don't fight. Just let it go through you. Don't let those emotions define who you are, but let them go through you. Because grief needs a witness. That's Dr. John Deloney. And the first witness must be you. I've cried alone in a room, realizing the detrimental aspects of my life. And that has been a good thing. Because I did need to grieve that 8-year-old version of me. Step 1 to healing process. Day 3 to 4, name one survival pattern that you realize now you still use today. The examples are people pleasing, shut down, hyper independence, overthinking, bracing for collapse, avoidance, day 5 to 7. So here's the thing. Once you acknowledge a truth, the reason why love and truth are synonymous is because love is what allows you to act on that truth. Because if you just name the truth, but you don't behave in a new way regarding the truth, whether positive or negative, it's not love. Love is what allows you to act when the truth is ascertained. As Tony Robbins says, the only way to change your life is through massive, radical action. Right? And so you take one action that builds safety instead of performance. So tell one honest sentence. Take one slow breath through the nose, out the mouth before reacting. Set one boundary with an individual. Face one money number. Look at your finances and just be like, yeah, you know what? Let me get this in order. Let me get this in line. Ask one safe person for help. If you don't have anyone in your life that you believe to be safe, DM us. DMs are wide open. My wife and I will do our utmost to be there for you. And so that's how you stop reliving the first home. You build a new one. It's like I said, healing only comes when you experience something new. Introduce order into chaos. It's the most amazing thing. And I just want you to understand something. You are not weak because you learn survival early. You are strong. Perhaps the strongest person around. You just don't even know it yet. But strength alone won't make you whole. Truth and love will. So, what's your next step? Drop it in one sentence in the comments. And if you want structure, accountability, and people rebuilding with you, join us in Skool. The link is in the description. And resources are also in this description if you're in a dark place. Remember, you are not alone. This is Thomas Emmanuel Arms O'Brien. I love you guys.